All right. Excited for this this podcast with Bob Wilson. He's the founder of Bob Wilson and Associates back in 1986. If he could be faulted with any like meager or low decisions, it was maybe to hire me alongside Heather back over 14 years ago. Bob is a personal mentor of mine, someone who's taught me such a great deal, not only about Predictive Index, which we'll get a chance to talk about today, but just about being a leader, being a manager, being just a strong thinker and stronger thinker that I've been. Hopefully today we're going to get into a lot about his journey, not only being a leader, but coaching and developing leaders from 1986 and beyond all the way through today. We're also going to tour later on in today's podcast into the PI Masterclass. So stick around for that. I'll put it in the show notes. More about Bob, more about ADVISA, as you've always found in the show notes as you look down. So Bob, thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. So my first question is this: elevator pitch. Bob Wilson and Associates, 1986. You're sitting down with me. I'm the CEO of just an extraordinarily successful manufacturing company in Muncie, Indiana. What's your pitch for Bob Wilson and Associates, 1986?
Oh gosh, really the pitch was fill out a PI. Sent out a lot of letters and return cards were so. After I went through the training with Arnold, I had developed kind of my own marketing plan that I'd send out. I think there were 4 different versions of letters, just one-page things with a return postcard saying, do you have hiring problems? Do you have management problems? Basically, the question saying if you felt there was something that you could, that the knowledge that I'd provide would yield a benefit, then send this card back. And so sent out 300 or 400 of those, and the first week or two got a half a dozen, probably more than that, cards back. And it was like, wow. So I'd call up, set an appointment, and the first thing I did would be to give them a PI.
What did it look like then?
A piece of paper, and then you had the metal scoring sheets. So I'd sit down and score it, and then just start talking. And I was not a good salesperson at that point. I really didn't ask many questions. I just talked, and I'd do more telling than asking, but it was brute force sales, really.
All right, which is an approach.
Yeah.
That is an approach that I still see sometimes.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go forward to today. You walk into a room. What's your elevator pitch for ADVISA in 2024?
Well, I am retired from ADVISA, so but when I talk about it, I talk about the reality that organizations are suffering because they can't keep people, and they can't keep people engaged, and they can't just keep people, and there aren't enough people. And so it is important for those organizations to understand what is it that's going to engage their people, and how do you create an environment, a culture that will allow them to want to come to work. And for so many businesses that are doing the work of today's society, they're not prepared to understand the culture to begin with, and then to certainly create it. And that is it's an issue that I think goes across organizations in the country.
Excellent. Yeah. So I have a question that's personal. So you started, but we can go into that story later about how it started and everything, and even that over the years we'll get to. My question for you, as someone who's been a mentor for so many people, is who was your greatest mentor?
Well, there were several. I think Marshall Mazer, who was the founder of a family business that I worked for 8 years. And he was a guy that I looked at and said, I like what he does. I like how he does it. And his profile was probably very similar to mine. So I looked up to him, and because he was an entrepreneur that started with an idea and turned that idea into a very successful mid-sized manufacturing company.
Is there any story in particular that would highlight one of those lessons?
A story I've told many times, and probably you've heard it, is my first day on the job. I was hired as a new product development manager, and he called me in, shook my hand. He said, "I don't know what the hell you're going to do." I've developed. He was an engineer, and he had created a number of products that he couldn't figure out how to sell, and the idea of a new product development manager was figure out how to sell it. And so day one on the job, shook my hand, said, I don't know what you're going to do, but you said you could develop new products. There's your desk, there's your pencils. Go make me some money. And that was my job description. Go make me some money. 5 words. And so that's what I did.
Oh, wow. That's great. You said there was many. Marshall was the first one you came up with. Is there another that came to mind?
Arnold Daniels, who developed PI. He was an interesting fellow, very curmudgeonly, and he came to visit our house in Louisville twice, because we started the business in Louisville. And when he came in, this was probably 2 or 3 years into what was initially Prendex Bob Wilson. That was the first name of the business.
Okay.
But Dana, my wife, was completely undone because he'd come over and we'd spend all our time arguing about what PI was, what it wasn't. And she was undone because she'd be thinking, he's going to fire you. But so he was a mentor. I'm not one who takes advice well, or it's been hard to take advice. It was more my style to watch people and try to take how they did things and use them.
Mm. And so, quick dive into the genesis of Prendex Bob Wilson and Bob Wilson Associates. Like, did you always have an entrepreneurial spirit, or what moved you to make that call? I mean, you're a brilliant man. You've had some success at other things. Why this versus something else?
Well, I didn't know what this was going to be. I knew I wanted my own business. Mm-hmm. So, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, a poor, working class family. And initially, the only people I knew that went to college were my teachers and my doctors. Mm. So, and the doctors seemed to have more money. So I wanted to become a doctor. That was the direction that I took. And I worked in a hospital, and that was it. There's another mentor, was a Haitian guy named Francis Alerti, who was the the head of the lab, he was a pathologist, and I worked for him and did a bunch of jobs. While I was in high school, I was working more than 40 hours a week most of the time because I had two jobs to where I wouldn't be visible that I was working 40 hours. So where was I going? What was the starting question?
About you want to be a doctor because that's where the money was, and then we're doing work at that hospital because that was the path you were going down.
And so that was doctors was where I thought the money was, and so I went to college, went to Northwestern on scholarships in pre-med, and I never really learned how to study, so organic chemistry and calculus, I flunked both of them. And because you actually had to study that in order to do well. And so that was the end of my medical journey. So got an undergrad in psychology, and I went to business school at University of Michigan. And I knew early on I wanted to have a business. So when Dana and I got engaged, we started putting her money away to develop a runway for starting a business, to have the cash to do that. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that at some point I would start one. And so when I was out of a job in Louisville, and we're not going to go there in terms of how I got out of a job, because but I was looking for something that could be mine, and I'd been introduced into PI, and so started going down that as well as several other avenues, and wound up getting a license for Predictive Index at that point.
Awesome. Well, so you started looking at leadership. You wanted to be a business owner, and then you found yourself sending letters out to these leaders. Likely they were the owners of these businesses, as high up as you can get. So since then, all the way up through now, since you recently retired, you've been in these rooms with leaders, coaching leaders, guiding leaders, looking at teams. So one thing I'd like to hear from you is what you think over that amount of time, what's the greatest fallacy as it relates to leadership or being a leader? A fallacy that I always had was I always thought, once introduced to PI, that the best leaders would be people like me, because, well, it would only make sense. And I found that people who were highest A's, and I assume that most of your audience knows what that means, and that is true, that the greatest percentage of people in leadership positions tend to be highest A's, but that doesn't make them good leaders. The good leaders are the people who understand themselves the best, and surround themselves with people who support those things that they're not good at. And so for me, that was a big fallacy, because it was an assumption that I went into, but you'd find people who were just awful, and had profiles just like me. And I spent a lot of my leadership career being awful too. So it's like that brute force leadership, where it's like that will behind it that's going to get me there, and it got me this far, so I can use it to kind of command and control through people, and then just wasn't effective at some point. I mean, limiting effectiveness, I suppose.
Yeah.
I remember you gave me, I asked for books coming on, or I don't even know if I asked for them. Everyone was just making me read books because, like, you're not good at this, man. So read books, BJ. And you gave me The Effective Executive by Peter Drucker.
Yeah.
And there was in between the lines. I just remember the most telling thing about that, about like that type of leader he was talking to, sounds like that leader
Mm-hmm.
that you just shared, was when he was talking about like the day in the life of a general manager
Mm-hmm.
in that book. And I was always just surprised at how the management was happening in between everything.
Yeah.
And he barely ever talked about the meetings. And you think the other way around, like there's these moments. It's like, no, there's not these moments. So I took that in. Are there any other like fallacies as you think, and maybe in general for a leader listening to this, that like, what's something that I'm not thinking about, or something that maybe people are kind of preaching and saying leadership is this, and in your experience, you found that not to be the case?
Well, I think that has evolved. What leadership is has evolved to a point where it's actually reasonably accurate. That the soft stuff is now at the place it should be, and the numbers are always important, but it's the soft stuff that makes the numbers. And so recognizing that the people, the culture, the effectiveness of leadership are the things that create long-term sustainability of numbers, especially in today's society. I think that the model of the Jack Welches in the 90s and 2000s of just grind them out is not sustainable in today's society, because people won't work in that world. I think there probably still are places where that exists in some of the law firms and consulting firms, where I think there still are places where people are asked to work the 70, 80-hour weeks with the pot of gold at the end of that rainbow of making tons and tons of money. But for the most part, I don't think that even the law firms. I have a good friend who's was a partner in one of the big firms in New York, and they're concerned about that, where it used to be a meat grinder, and it may still be to some degree, but they have to create a culture where people want to come to work. And that is something that wasn't, people didn't talk about that, they didn't think about it. And back when I started the business. Drucker talked about it, more tangentially, but still his focus was on satisfying the needs of people and making those, creating an environment where people wanted to work.
Dialing into that just a little bit more. When you've, over time, either within ADVISA or within the businesses that you've been brought into to give counsel, how did you address when like above average performers were either on the verge of burnout or were consistently burning out? You saw that was the case. What was some of the advice or counsel you would give folks as to, like, how do I effectively load manage these folks that they can maintain that performance and not kind of fall off this burnout cliff?
Well, it depended to some degree on who the manager was. If the manager, the leader, was a person who recognized that I had to keep these people, then a lot of times you'd talk about how would you create a support system so that you could get the best out of them. Going back to the issue I mentioned earlier, that recognizing what I'm good at and what I need help with. If you can take your best performers and keep them doing that which they're best at, and have them give to other people those things that other people can do, that makes sense.
Is there any examples of that where you found it was particularly the case over the years?
Yeah. I think some of them I didn't have anything to do with, just looking at ADVISA and how we've kind of morphed from having lone wolf consultants who did everything to now having a lot of different specialties, to where the consultants can focus on what they're really good at and other people can focus on other things. And that wasn't my idea, that was Millis's idea. The evolution of ADVISA to what it is today is, I didn't have a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I think you downplay that a little bit, because that's probably my next big question, which is leaders right now are, as they get older, they have to start thinking about what's going to happen to this place when I'm done, when I retire. I'm not going to do this until I die. I want to probably have some other aspirations. What would maybe either guidance or how you did it within ADVISA? How do you find a successor and build a successor while you're at the same time running the business? Because they seem like two different jobs that maybe is why it's a struggle for a lot of leaders.
Yeah, well, Arnold Daniels had a picture that he'd show, and I think it was Montgomery Ward, but it
I don't know
was
who that is.
He was the head of a retail operation in Chicago called Montgomery Ward's.
Okay.
And it was a picture, and somebody can Google it and see if I'm right. But it was a guy whose name was on the door. And it was a picture of him in his 70s, strapped to a chair, being carried out of his office because he essentially was, the board of directors or his family or somebody said, you can no longer be here. And he was forcibly removed.
He strapped himself to a chair?
No, other people strapped him to a chair and carried him out.
Wow.
That's almost what happened with Arnold Daniels. And that succession planning, I think people have to think about, as they're a leader, what it is that I want. What do I want to do? I knew all along that I wanted to start a business and run it. And then as I got older, I knew that I'd eventually want an exit ramp. And so it's just a matter of thinking, how do I do that? Where do I go from there? And that was a transition between Bob Wilson and Associates after Prendex Bob Wilson to ADVISA, because I knew my name wouldn't be important. It's what would keep the business going. And I think, a challenge of American family businesses is a lot of times parents will put their kids into positions that they can't be successful at. And I know you've seen it. I know I've seen it a bunch of times where the second generation or the third generation is really, they're put there, but they don't know what to do when they're there, and they don't enjoy what they're doing. And eventually the business goes poof, either by they sell it or it just dies, and that has happened a bunch of times. And I've got 3 sons, and they're great people, great adults. They're all successful. Brandon, who worked in the business for 8 years, and is very successful now running his own business, but he wasn't the guy to run ADVISA. So and I knew that for the kind of business that ADVISA became, my kids weren't the right ones. And so...
Was that hard? Was that a hard recognition, or was that just, it is what it is?
It is what it is. I mean, I had hopes that there would be somebody who had an interest and the personal proclivity to do it, but that wasn't going to be the case. So no, it wasn't hard really. Just they all had their own things that they wanted to do, and the business was going in the direction it was. And when the time came that we had to start looking at a successor, I knew that it wasn't going to come from my family.
Mm. So how'd you know you found the one?
I can't say that I'm sure, but it felt right. I mean, I know that at the time there were probably 3 or 4 people that thought that they should be the one, but they weren't. And so Heather was the one, and it's been a great choice. She's been terrific.
So once you had that feeling and you saw Heather, like, okay, I think this is going to work. What next? If I'm finding that person in my own business, I mean, you can expand it beyond even just the ADVISA story and the businesses we counsel. Like, what do I do now? Yeah. What'd you do?
Figured out what things that she could do initially to find her way in leadership. Siphon stuff off to her and let her make mistakes.
How long should it take?
How many years did you start after Heather? 2?
She's at what? How many years is she at now? I'm at 14.
I think she's 18.
18, so 4.
Yeah, but I don't. It's probably 19. But she'll tell us. I think that process went on for 4 or 5 years because it was just gradually giving her more and more and backing off more and more.
Either for yourself or for others, what's the hardest part of that process for the leader that's, okay, this might be my successor, I'm working, I'm siphoning work, I'm kind of pulling back in certain areas? What have you found to be the most difficult?
I think how it evolved was that I had to find other things to do. And, so the giving up command and authority is easier when you have other things that you want to accomplish with your life. It's also easier if you're doing other things. So when I started to get back into consulting and sales as the thing that I did with my time when I wasn't leading, that made it a lot easier. Just having a clear picture, because I wanted to work. It wasn't that I wanted to not work. I wanted to take more vacation. I didn't really, managing people wasn't something that, for me, it's always been hard work. Being nice isn't easy. So just getting back into sales and consulting was a good choice for me. But part of it was I hadn't done it for a while, so I had to get back into practice. I wasn't very good at it again.
That's another kind of ego hit, self-awareness hit that leaders would have to take, because it's tough to leave. I mean, a place of perceived dominance, like I'm at the top of the food chain. Here's what I'm doing. I'm making these type of decisions. I'm in these type of meetings. Even something that I self-select that's different, where I'm rusty, or things like that. And I'd imagine that several leaders retreat back into the post, or they start. I remember there was one client, I think John might have told me this story, where it's like just down fiddling around on the floor. And I think we'll just leave the business name out of it for the time being. And what's he doing all the way down? Like, what's he getting in the way for down there?
Yeah.
He's like, I built this Ferrari. If I want to come down and drive it,
Right.
you know, hell, that's what I'm going to do. It's like, you got to see, it's not effective, but you can understand it.
Right. Right. And, you know, I think the process with Heather and I was remarkably smooth. There were bumps, and the bumps were about communication and trust building and those kind of things. But for the most part, when she took the various roles she took, I think I was reasonably good at just saying, you decide, and letting that go, even if I disagreed.
Do you feel like that's the part where many leaders get stuck? Or do you feel like there's another kind of critical flaw when it comes to effectively allowing a successor to grow?
Chain of command is the big problem, because you used to report to me, now you report to Heather, and so you still come to me and I undermine Heather. I don't think that happened much, but that's what you see happening in a lot of those worlds.
Is there any, I know we have clients in this bucket, is there any hope, I don't want to be fatalist when I say this, but for organizations with, you know, and sons or and daughters and family business where there's just family names. They're just it's rife with family and extended family working in that business to maintain a healthy culture and have an effective succession plan. I know from experience it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
But is it close to impossible?
I think it can be. I mean, think about a business that I did strategic planning with that talked about G2 and then G3 and then G4, and this was a company with 1,200 employees, probably 25 of whom had the last name that was on the door, and those were all in executive chairs. Some of them competent, some of them not. Mm-hmm. I think the most of the time when that happens, the business sells. The sustainability of that is hard.
I remember you told me a story once where you came in to do strategic planning and police were there in advance.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I don't recall that, but it's possible.
It stuck with me. Yeah. I don't know where that story came from. It stuck with me. All right. So we dipped into succession planning a little bit, and you provided some counsel there in terms of how you thought about it, how you framed it, what you thought, some of those challenge moments that were in there. The theme I'm getting back is like, as a leader, you have to be willing to basically get above the business and see beyond yourself, first of all. And then you have to make another decision internally, but then also externally, to detach from something. And then not just detach, but reattach somewhere else.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, the links in the chain start to break when there's too much ambiguity going on, or you have too much time on your hands and you're still a functional executive.
Yeah.
So what do I do with myself? You kind of get in the way.
If you've got time in your hands, you can't help but meddle.
Yeah.
So and that's counsel that I've given to other people as they look to find a successor, whether it's a senior leader or an owner or a president, is first thing you've got to do is find other things for you to do if you're going to give things up. Because a lot of the people in those roles are, they can't not be busy. And if they don't have things to be busy with, they're going to be busy with things that they know how to do. And that creates confusion.
I'm just trying to be helpful.
Yeah.
What my intention was.
Yeah.
A lot of those conversations. I want to go a higher level real quick and get your answer to this question. And you can take this down whatever track you want, Bob. What do you feel are the main characteristics or the best characteristics of an excellent leader? You touched on a few earlier on, but I'd love to condense them back here.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is a lot of these things are things that I don't really possess.
It's a great self-awareness moment, Bob.
Thank you. Listening and wanting to listen. Openness to ideas and the world. Just looking at it with a willingness to learn. It always helps to be smart, and that unfortunately isn't something that you can get an injection of. I can get Botox injected into me, but I can't get brains.
It's going to be on a T-shirt after this.
Yeah, no. Leaders have to be comfortable interacting with the people around them and doing the hard things. I think that's a thing that leaders can fail as a result of. Putting the hard things off until last, and really the hard things are the things you have to make sure you address first.
What are some examples of some hard things?
Dealing with problems, just whatever those problems are, people problems, money problems. I think successful leaders that are always looking for or at least aware of the obstacles to their ability to be successful and address them.
Anything else?
I'm sure there's a million things.
Those are the ones at the top of the heap. I guess a question as we start to tie up this part of our conversation. What do you feel are top challenges that are maybe different for leaders of today?
The society is so fractured that creates challenges of there are so many ways to alienate people that you have to be cautious about the fractured nature of society and just kind of tiptoe around it. I don't know that was that there were as many kind of societal potholes for leaders 20 years ago as there are today.
Do you have any wisdom for a leader that's maybe navigating through something like that right now, or maybe stepping in it?
Yeah, they keep something to wash your shoes, because there's a lot of it there, and it is just thinking through ways. There's so many potential avenues to alienate, and as a leader, you really can't. You have to do your best to run your business and stay out of people responding negatively to you for reasons that don't really impact the business.
Practical wisdom. All right. Anything else on leadership that you think's worth sharing? Leadership, succession planning.
Yeah, the reality is, BJ, these are things that I'm not thinking a whole lot about at this point. I think about my grandkids. I think about who's going to start for the Cubs. The important things.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it goes back to what you just said, Bob, earlier about like, I've always found you to be a convicted man, like especially when it comes to like what you like and what you don't like, what you pursue and what you don't do. You're deliberate about it. You're deliberate about it with your calendar, how our core values were created about family and these things that just have dirt over time, and you lived them. Like you've done them consistently, which made them all the more credible when they're happening. And it's not surprising that when you effectively shift gears, having the wherewithal to know, I need something over here that I care about, and I'm going to move these things over here. And the pause that you've taken, and probably more than one serving, to reevaluate that and do that. I mean, it's aspirational. I mean, not only for me at some point, but for leaders in general. So I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Now we're going to change gears.
Okay.
We're going to do PI Masterclass.
Okay.
With Bob. Now, precursor to all this, if you've never heard of Predictive Index before or ABCD, this is probably not the place you should start. Or maybe it is. I don't know. It's I want to chat with Bob about some things that are a little more nuanced, maybe some things that with all the advancements in the PI software are kind of in the shadows or in the nooks and crannies, but they're still there and they're still pertinent to leaders. So I encourage you to look at some previous podcasts, potentially some things out there for Predictive Index to at least get a handle on just the fundamentals before you get to this. But at least for me, Bob has put me in front of, spent windshield time with Bob over the years learning PI. I've done something called sorting packets, and I've seen thousands of these PI patterns and guidance, and I've had Bob give me I think I'm really getting something right. And then Bob narrows his eyes, shakes his head, and I knew that like light guiding touch that I missed that one. I got that one wrong. So hopefully we can distill some of this and have some fun with PI as it relates to this. So Bob, A, B, C, and D. So if we're on the high side of these drives, the four main drives, A, B, C, and D, I'd love to go from kind of top to bottom. Some things that you think are maybe not often talked about, but still incredibly important and high impact.
Hey,
start with the A drive. High A.
In terms of?
Just things that like aren't going to come through just in a report. Like some things that if with the highest A or a highest B, highest C, highest D. So if we start with the highest A.
I was with Beth in training, and she said to me, I don't like it when you say always about something. And I said, what is it that I said always about? And you said, high A's are always driven to win. And I said, yeah, that's right. She said, well, how does that wash? I don't like that always. I said, well, what you have to realize is that they are driven to win, but the definition of what that win is what evolves. So, the win is maybe a longer term. It may be for independence. It could. High A's can change their behaviors when they recognize that the win is different than what it used to be. And that is the easiest way for high A's to change their behaviors, is when they see that what they actually want is different than what they thought they wanted. So, high A's can be oblivious. They can be blind to some of their desire, the consequences of their actions.
Why is that?
That self-assuredness, because their confidence comes from within. That they just believe that this is right, and then or that this is going to get them what they want. But the ramifications of their actions cause them to not get what they want.
Mm-hmm.
That's happened to me a lot.
Why is loyalty? Talk about loyalty in high A's.
Mm-hmm. That is a blind spot that they can perceive. Where they perceive someone as loyal to them, they can overlook some of their foibles.
Can you give me some examples?
Yeah, a leader, a high A leader with a team of senior leaders who aren't very productive but are very obsequious. And yes, you're right. Yes, and I can overlook their a company that I worked with had a group of leaders who were all high A's. He was a highest A, but nobody would disagree with him. Just it didn't happen. So whatever the company did, for better or worse, would be based on what the owner, president, decided, and sometimes those weren't very good decisions.
And probably does havoc for accountability down chain. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I know I've seen a number of those situations. The one that came to mind was the most recent one. I'm sure you have as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just shining the light of awareness on that with a gentle hand is the best way I can put it, to see, like, do you see this? Do you kind of like an inch? I've stepped in it a few times, like bringing the spotlight into the blind spot.
Yeah,
and you get a visceral, like, don't darken my doorstep.
Right.
Okay, well, I just got a
Yeah.
little too assertive in there. I'm not wrong, but
yeah,
nonetheless, I can't help you now because I am no longer part of this conversation.
yeah. I'm no longer employed. That.
How about the B drive, high B? Like, what's something that we maybe should think about that maybe isn't just like on the surface as we learn PI and we kind of read our reports?
High blind spot for high Bs is they think they can change people. Because high Bs can change themselves. There is no drive that is more flexible than a B, and that I can present in all these different ways. I can become all these different things, and as a result, highest B leaders can think, I can make you into this or that, or through motivation and encouragement, and that is a concern for highest Bs.
How have you seen them work through that? So have you seen someone turn a corner on that, where maybe they strike 1, strike 2, strike 9, strike 22, but you get them to a place where there's a little bit more dose of reality?
Yeah, I think it's how quickly do I mature? How quickly do I gain that experience? It's A's and B's and C's and D's. There are some of them that are that never get it, and some of them get it young. The trial and error sometimes educates and sometimes leaves ignorance. Keep making the same mistakes.
Yeah, I've had a few tough conversations in the recent memory. Just managers, it's like they've done a master class on how to beat themselves up, when I'm literally trying to tell them, like, they're not smart. They just don't want to do this job. They don't want to do it. And it's just like, then they just start the talk track back over. I'm like, okay, if you want to keep beating yourself up and try the new thing, I'm like, everything's screaming at me that this person really likes you and they're a really good culture fit, but they don't want to do the thing that you pay them money to. Like I've tried to break that down. It's amazing how no.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, okay, it's your company. How about high C's?
I think the hardest thing for a lot of people to understand in terms of both high C's and high D's is that they both like change. C's and D's are going to be, and they like competition, but they like it in ways that are comfortable for them. So the high C's like to compete, but they like to know what their role is. They like to be part of a team. They like, and everybody wants to be part of change, because when you have a successful change, it feels good when you actually accomplish something. And that it was another conversation with Beth this week that we talk about high A's want to have impact, and the question she asked, doesn't everybody want to have impact? The answer is yes, but they all want it in their own ways. Mm-hmm. So B's want impact, C's want impact, D's want impact. A's want impact that is directly the result of their actions. Yeah. The other folks want it in ways that are satisfactory to them. I learned something about C's, and PI is ever interesting in the things that you can learn. And we talk about C being a social drive, and that high C's want to belong, they want to be a part of something. But just in conversations with people, it really is clear that high C's just want closeness. They want to be there with the people that they care about. Just being there, and doesn't have to do anything, doesn't have to, just being there. It's interesting.
I joke, my wife and I joke. My wife is an opposite pattern to me. She's extremely high C, I'm extremely low C. And I shared with her once, I'm like, so it seems like you want me here in this house, just in a different room, available for the time when, if should come, you need me. Mm-hmm. She's like, yes. And as a low C, I'm like, that makes no sense.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't make a difference if I'm here. But the high C's,
yeah,
knowing you're there is a sense of security in there. What about the D, high D folks?
They're just always wanting it better, wanting it as close to perfect as possible. The A and the D are both binary sorts, and that is what makes criticality in both of them. That there are only two choices. For A's, it's winning and losing. For D's, it's perfect and imperfect. I was talking to my middle son, Brandon, recently about his younger brother, Reed, who is a low A and a low D. And I just pointed out to him, Reed is not a critical person. He just can handle lots of stuff that would drive you crazy, because he's not bothered by a lot of stuff. For A's and D's, they're bothered by things.
What's some guidance? I mean, obviously in short here, for a high D to find the signal in the cacophony of details that they're trying to unilaterally focus on at the same time?
Well, I think D's, what can make things easier for highest D's is just, as for A's, if they're overwhelmed, redefining what perfect means. That perfect is can be a less perfect version of perfect than what goes on in your mind that is driving you crazy. And to strive, and that again tends to be something that maturity and wisdom and age helps.
Excellent. Let's go low on the drives. We don't have to linger on any given one, but maybe some things that we don't talk about enough or we should know if we're trying to apply the insights from PI about a low A.
Low A's can be very effective leaders, which I think particularly high A's can have problems coming to grips with. The challenge with low A leaders is kind of the opposite of the high A leaders. They just have to be able to address conflict when it's there. That talked about earlier, an effective leader has to address problems fast. Bill Gates said in a book a long time ago, the news that has to travel fastest is always bad news. You have to find the bad news, and for low A's, they've got to find the bad news and address it. And that's their challenge of being a leader, where for a high A, it's not making everything to other people bad news. Trying to make it so that it's more positive. It's going back to the high A for a second. It's hard for high A's to celebrate because there's more interest really in the next thing. For low A's, for most everybody else, it's easy to celebrate.
Maybe what about low B's?
Being positive, that is can be a challenge. Thinking about what needs to be communicated and making sure that it is. Getting out what's in my mind to people that need to know what it is. Because I want to think through things as a low B to make sure that I'm going to handle it in a way that makes sense for me. And a lot of times I think through it so much that I don't actually talk about it. So being aware of that. And
then when I do talk about it, I've marinated on it so much, and maybe somebody's getting their first dose of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. About low C's?
Focus is a challenge. Just making sure that the things that you start get finished.
I think we can leave it that one there. I could ring that bell all day long. And low D's?
Knowing what's too far, knowing the boundaries of permissibility that sometimes low D's cannot be aware of.
All right. So we went general, open the floor for those. Now we're going to go into some actual patterns.
Okay.
And as I turn the page here, you're going to get to see these patterns on here. And what I'd love to do in the time that we have remaining, when's your hard stop again, Bob?
Probably 10 after.
10 after. Okay, great. This will be good. Give us just enough of these to dive into, although I could probably do this all afternoon. Maybe throw whiskey right up in the middle and just keep going. What should we know about this pattern? So I'm going to put the whole pattern up. We can linger where we want. For those with exposure to PI, there's self-concept, and synthesis. For the purposes of our conversation today, assume all the data is fresh, Bob.
Yeah.
We just got all of it yesterday.
Yeah.
And there's no aging on any of this.
Yep.
What should we know about this person? Like this person maybe as an employee, as a leader, as a manager, and if we're managing them, just walk through some of the highlights as you feel it. And then when we've exhausted one, we'll go to the next.
Okay.
Sound good? All right, here's our first.
The very headstrong person who is directed at what they're directed at. They can be really charming. As a performer, they're going to be a person who kind of likes to be a Superman, meaning I operate best in chaos, so I'll create environments where I can put on the cape and come save the day. A difficult person to manage because they are going to really operate best where what you want and what they want are completely aligned. They're going to be comfortable saying, no, I don't want to do that.
But you have to. Well, what's the punishment?
And even I didn't have a job before I didn't have this one. So fire me.
Yeah. Anything else?
Opinionated and yet charming.
All right. Here's another one.
Let's go back to that other one a second. An interesting thing about that is a lot of people will, with that kind of profile, sometimes aspire to leadership roles, and a lot of times when they get there, find that there's too much just there's a Yiddish word, tsuris, that means just troubles. And the troubles, the tsuris of being in a leadership role, of having lots of things it sometimes isn't just worth it. I'd rather be a lone wolf and just do my thing.
Yeah. We see a lot of this pattern like field sales.
Yeah.
Or early stage startup companies where they're really, what's a job description? We just got to get the work done, and you trading hats all day long. And as a company matures, they become a problem in their own organization.
Yeah.
Because they're still trying to switch hats. It's like, whoa. You stop moving things.
Yeah.
This is how we used to do it. This is how I built this company. It's like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ready for the next one?
Yeah.
All right.
This is a tough cookie. This was probably my favorite profile to sell, because they liked the data of PI, and they liked just the ability to have the knowledge to understand people, because they don't. And PI helps people like this recognize that. And there was a guy who had a profile very similar to this, that was the first person that I ever sold, and he absolutely loved PI. And in those days, it wasn't even on a computer in 1986. And he would keep the profiles of his 110 employees in the suit coat pocket of his jacket. And if he went to talk to BJ would come up and say, McKay. And he'd pull them out. They'd be in alphabetical order. He'd flip through, he'd look at it, and then he'd have the conversation. Because it told him what to do. And of course, all the people who worked for him thought he was absolutely nuts. But they're very challenging, very critical. When I did in the mid-90s, I went through all the profiles of all the CEOs that I had tested, probably 200 at that point, and this was the most common one. I would guess today it's a higher B and a lower D. But that, in those days, and I know there's still a lot of them out there, whether it's the most common one or not anymore, I don't know.
Yeah.
What's your sense?
I agree with you. I'd say this is it's still floating around the executive team level.
Yeah.
A lot of organizations, but they're like in their corner. They put them in like a technical, functional. They try to keep them inoculated from the people side of the business, and they're in finance, engineering,
Yeah.
technical roles, and they're like a knowledge depot rather than, hey, go to this person for this, like your engagement, for your fulfillment, for this
Right.
conversation about how your perceptions of work and it's just that doesn't. I don't want to do that. CEOs, I still have a few, more than a few, that have this, but they're also the ones that are the most successful ones are the ones that realize like I need to share things that are extremely uncomfortable for me to share. I need to sit in a room and care about things that I don't personally care about.
Yeah.
Or else my team's going to be disengaged with me, and it's going to be more unintentionally fear-based.
Well, and that's the business I was referring to before, BJ, too, that this guy has to recognize that winning for him is having his people be happy.
Yep.
And that
winning makes you happy, right? Getting it right makes you happy, right?
Yeah.
Like, I pay the full amount. No, I'm 100% agree. Here, short time. What do we think here?
nice guy, quiet, or gal. Takes a while to get to know. Good team player. The high E makes him a little bit hard to connect with. But still, as you get to know them, they'll be warm, and it'll take a while. Steady performer, that somebody you want a lot of on your team generally.
How about as a leader?
Depends on what kind of area. Small team. This is like a good working team leader. If you had an accounts payable department of 5 people and one was a senior, this would be a good profile for that.
Excellent.
And this is fairly close to my son Reed's profile.
All right.
Really warm, sweet, engaging, very easy to get along with, people person, not very critical at all. And it's interesting in that Reed is the head of policy for a police department, and I think what he's best at is the political stuff, and he got there as a statistician. So the where you have people with this kind of profile who can understand whatever the science is, they can be really valuable because they can communicate what that is to the people who need to know it.
All right. This fun character.
Yeah, I had a few of those. Just very aggressive, opinionated, and that I've had a couple of those who had teams of yes people around them. That generally fun, interesting. I mean, this would be Bobby Knight's profile. It would be Norman Schwarzkopf's profile. Probably Lyndon Johnson's profile. A lot of opinionated. They can be really fun, but jerky too.
All right, this will be our, for time's sake, this will be our last one.
Okay, that's a very sweet, accommodating, conscientious, hardworking. This is going to be a person who, in a role where they've got a clearly defined job, they're going to churn out lots and lots of good work. The challenge is, do they over-perfectify it, whatever that means. But yeah, doing 4 times perfect as opposed to just good enough.
Wonderful. Well, Bob, I could probably put up hundreds of these and spend the afternoon. It'd be awesome. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us, not only just the backdrop of leadership and ADVISA, and just personally, just being a part of saying yes to me to join the organization. My life is significantly better. I'm a better leader. I'm a better man. I'm a better husband. I'm a better dad because of it. And for those of you listening, this man is, I mean, and alongside obviously my Heather Haas, who hired me, has just really surrounded us with just amazing human beings that stretch us, help us grow in a culture that should be admired. I mean, it really should be. It's a wonderful one to be a part of, but it wouldn't exist without you. Yeah, so true. Thank you for that. Thanks for making the trek up to the metropolis of Muncie. We appreciate it to be here. And for those listening, if you want to learn more about this, obviously it's on wherever you're viewing this. It's easy to get a hold of me. It's easy to learn more about ADVISA and our team. And if you want to sit down with Bob yourself, probably something that we can make happen. If you'd like the extreme poor version, I am here as well. And maybe sometime we'll have John Ranaletta back to sit with Bob if they're both so willing, and we could sure. Really dive deep into the PI netherworld and share some insights. So thanks, Bob, for joining us. I appreciate it.
All right, you're welcome.